and get started. And Kelly, if you'll sort of monitor if anybody else starts trying to get in and admit them, that'd be great. Just so you know, we are going to be, or I am currently recording this so that we can put it on Facebook or our website so that if others want to watch it, they can. So, but I am excited to see all of you for our second track. The first track for Lent was at 5:30 with Jeff on the Creeds and Confessions. And this particular program is being hosted by a wonderful crew of ladies and speakers to come in the coming weeks. And so I'm delighted to have Kelly Norrell and Colleen Shannon to co-lead this with me. They have worked so hard on this. And we'll tell you a little bit more about this process in just a moment. But I certainly want to highlight a couple of prayer concerns. And if you have any, please certainly let us know, and then I'll open with prayer. We are so glad to see Ely, as we already talked to him. Gaines Pittenger is making a slow recovery. He remains in Nashville and will for a while. And thankfully he has a son-in-law that is a doctor there that it's monitoring him. So that's good. I know that Hilda Leip is scheduled, or she may have already received her last treatment, cancer treatment. So we're excited to hear that. Miss Mary Wilson is here somewhere. There's Mary. Hey. She's in rehab at Well Park. Mary, you want to say anything?
No, just hello. I am here in rehab, and so doing well. I get to go home Saturday. So I don't have much longer. So good. Anyway, I'm doing fine.
I know you're working hard. Good. Y'all be thinking of the Penders. Hopefully you saw the announcement that William's mother died, and are holding them in prayer. So it was kind of a sad situation. She took a fall and was not able to recover from it, unfortunately. But all the siblings are in Fripp and surrounding each other and loving on each other. So that's good. Any other prayer concerns or joys that you'd like to raise up?
And don't forget Ely.
Yeah, right. Oh, we are
He still can't do anything.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Jean?
Prayers for the Skipper family. David's father is in his last days. They're just waiting. They didn't think he'd last 24 hours from last night, but he's still here. I haven't heard from David since this morning, but he's breathing very heavily, and it's not going to be long. But he's been in a nursing home with due to 3 strokes for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
He has basically not had a life for 5 years. It's been
goodness.
Anyway, that's imminent. So just prayer for the family. It's very good. Andy is the one that's just, Andy and his granddad were soulmates. And Andy sent last night an email with about 150 memories that he had of his grandfather.
Oh my.
But that's what he'll always have, the memories. But he was very close. I feel like Franklin's, I feel like he would pass if Andy could come home, just so Andy, you know, at this point, it's not going to happen. Anyway, prayers for the Skippers.
Thank you for sharing that, Jean. Pam, I saw your hand up.
Yes, former church member Glenn Castle has a very rare type of kidney cancer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We saw him today we went to Knoxville to the eye doctor today, and Dale had a nice 10-minute visit with him out in the waiting room, and he's undergoing some treatment, and they're trying to do what they can, but it is a very rare, very unusual type of kidney cancer.
Goodness. Thank you for sharing that, Pam. All right. Do I see any other hands? I don't think so. Well,
Jean, are your hands doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Good.
There is another one. Melanie called me yesterday. Probably nobody beside the Armstrongs would know Mary Mac Robinson. She married Steve Wilson. He had a major heart attack yesterday.
Oh dear.
And they actually, they kind of put him out yesterday to freeze him up or something. And then they were going to see today whether he could be rehabbed. So it's very serious. He's like 56 years old.
Oh.
And she and Melanie were she grew up in the church, and her parents too. And they were very good friends, and it's just very sad right now. It's touch and go.
Golly. Well, friends, let me open with a word of prayer and we'll get started. Good and gracious God, we come to you on this Lenten day, mindful of so many things in our lives, so many joys, so many laments, so many things in our hearts that we lift up to you. We are grateful to gather together, and we lift up those prayers that we have named aloud, recognizing that we all have prayers in our hearts that you know. Be with those who are suffering and in pain. Be with those who are caring for and working to mend those in pain. And help us to carry your love to those that need it most. Oh God, hear our prayers for this evening as we live into your scripture from Matthew 25. Be with us in conversation and lead your spirit to lend your truth and wisdom to us. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, friends, I'm going to ask you, if you haven't already, to mute yourselves, except for Kelly and Colleen, just so that we can minimize any distractions. And if you hear dogs barking, it's most likely going to be me or maybe Colleen. So you'll just have to put up with it, but you'll be fine. Kelly is going to start a PowerPoint presentation, and so we will not be able to see each other for most of it, but we do hope if you have any questions that you will just speak up, okay? So don't, if you have something, just unmute yourself and let us know what you have on your mind. We do have a couple of videos, so maybe not during the videos, but maybe after the videos if you have questions. I think that'll be pretty straightforward. So Kelly, let's get started. All right. Wonderful.
Wait.
Do you have an arrow that goes, there you go. Okay, so we've done that. So we're gonna go, so this is Matthew 25. This is a pretty familiar, famous scripture, I hope that you know, and it's pretty long. So I'm only gonna highlight this from Matthew 25. And so it says, then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. So I pray that is a familiar text for you, a text that lifts up that we are responsible for those that are suffering, for those that are seeking mercy and justice, and that when we serve the least of these, we are serving God. And so we can go on to the next slide, I think. So what is Matthew 25? Well, we just told you the scripture. This is an initiative by our denomination, the PCUSA, and it was an initiative that came out of the General Assemblies, which is our highest governing bodies, after the 222nd and 223rd General Assemblies, which were convicted to act boldly and compassionately to serve people who are hungry, oppressed, imprisoned, or poor. And so they came together and they decided to have this initiative, a call to action to engage in the world so that our faith, we don't only talk about our faith, but we live into our faith with the possibility of waking up to new things that God would show us. And so today is simply an introduction. It's me and Colleen and Kelly giving you an overview of Matthew 25, and then we will have speakers the following 4 Wednesdays to highlight more specific things, and you'll hear about that a little bit later. But we are going to be specifically exploring this Matthew 25 initiative through the lenses of our particular context here in East Tennessee, but specifically in downtown Knoxville. And I'm excited about those that we've lined up to come and tell us about what's been happening, especially during this pandemic. And so I want to emphasize that this is not a program. This is a way for us to refocus and re-energize and help us own the ministries that we're already participating in, because we have a lot of wonderful ministries that we are already engaged in. But to recognize that during this pandemic, we've sort of been in survival mode, and it's time for us to figure out ways to move from that survivalist mode into ensuring that people that are suffering are not only surviving, but they're thriving. And so this is a conversation between the local and global mission committees, which are the ones that are driving this, this process of looking at Matthew 25. And so over the past couple of months, these two committees have gathered together and researched it and have decided that this is something that would be exciting to help us refocus and move forward. And so we are excited that they had a joint statement that they've written, and we'll share that with you later on towards the end of the series. But again, this is a conversation. So we want you to let us know what you're thinking about and how we can engage in this together. So what the heck is Matthew 25? Again, it's not a program, but it's an identity and it's a culture. And we're trying to live into this call from Matthew 25 and to renew this commitment, especially now when it's prime time to gear up, even before the pandemic ends. And so if we've been forced to sort of pay attention to the news, and we can't help but recognize that there are many silent cracks in our society, cracks of injustice, cracks of things that have long been ignored, that have come to the forefront of life that we can no longer ignore. Real issues that affect our neighbors and the people that we know, including ourselves. And so one of the things, friends, that we keep hearing over and over again from many of you is this desire to figure out how we can become engaged in downtown Knoxville. How do we become more relevant in this urban context? I've been doing a little bit of research. Some of you know that I'm in this Doctorate of Ministry program. And so I've been looking a little bit more at our congregation, and I learned that we represent 31 different zip codes in Knoxville, 31. We know that we're an urban congregation, that most of us are traveling from even as far as Seymour or even farther, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing. But I also want to lift up that within the church's zip code, we only have 5 households that live in the same zip code as the church, which is pretty remarkable. And so we do not necessarily reflect the surrounding community. And so I think there's an exciting opportunity to engage in ways that perhaps we haven't before. And so the question, and I don't want this to seem like a morbid question, but one of the things I want you to think about is, if our church vanished today, how would our community be affected? In other words, would we be missed? And so I think we would. That's my hope. I think that's all of our hope. And I think we are known for some things, but I hope it's not just our beautiful building and the old graveyard. I think there are other things, and that's what I want us to highlight and hope to refocus towards doing even more in the local community. And so I'm hoping that the Holy Spirit will be moving in and through and surrounding us, helping us discern as we figure out what it means to take these first steps to engage further in the life of the community that we've been in for a long time. And so it's exciting, it's frightening. This is not something that we're going to figure out tonight or in the 4 weeks that are to come, but it is something that we can do together and engage in conversation together. Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like I've been talking forever. So now we're going to play a video, Miss Kelly, who's our tech master tonight.
Matthew 25 calls us to actively engage in the world around us, to be a living translation of Jesus Christ. We invite you to make a commitment to become a Matthew 25 church and embrace one or more of these three focuses: building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, eradicating systemic poverty. We must put feet to faith.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Let me get back.
It's only 40 seconds, so that's good.
Matthew 25 calls us to actively engage in the world around us, to be a living translation of Jesus Christ. We invite you to make a commitment to become a Matthew 25 church and embrace one or more of these three focuses: building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, eradicating systemic poverty. We must put feet to faith, hands to hope, and legs to love. Learn more about Matthew 25 at our website.
Well, aren't we already doing some of this? We sure are. Do you recognize the fish box on the screen? This is the container that children have used in our church for 30 years to receive their donations to the One Great Hour of Sharing. Why do you suppose it's a fish? Well, because it connotes the sharing in the parable of the loaves and the fishes. If we all give a little bit, there is enough for everyone. It was also the symbol used by early Christians who often had to meet in secret, but wanted to reach out to one another. It is also the symbol of the oft used example of give a person a fish and you feed them for a day. Teach a person to fish and you feed them for a lifetime. But the programs of the One Great Hour of Sharing take it one step further by working to make room at the river so everyone has the opportunity to fish for themselves and their communities. In 1947, when the whole world was devastated following World War II, Presbyterians joined with other mainline denominations to create the One Great Hour of Sharing offering to respond to hunger, sickness, refugees, formerly imprisoned people, and war-torn communities around the world. Once again, our world is facing such a global crisis, and Presbyterians are responding by addressing racism and poverty through the Matthew 25 emphasis and giving to the 75-year-old offering, the One Great Hour of Sharing. First Presbyterian Church has been incredibly generous over the years in the support of this offering. Just since the start of this new century, our members have given almost $80,000 in the past 20 years, averaging almost $4,000 each year, except last year, when we only gave $1,100. As we reflect on Jesus' admonition in Matthew 25, let's do better this year. Now, let's look at how one congregation is meeting this challenge and growing in vitality as a result.
You ready? I'm gonna build God's house. Just need the right stuff. Joyce, give me your card so I can build God's house.
Hey, can I help?
Hey, Bill, give me your card so I can build God's house. Laura, give me your card. Okay, folks, let's do this. Yeah. I got this. Really? That's the only way we can do it. That's the only way I know how to do it. All right. Cool. What am I missing? Oh. What do you say we build God's house together?
I like that. Let's build God's house together.
Angela, let's build God's house together.
Valerie, let's build God's house together.
Amen, brother, let's do it.
Let's build God's house together.
Let's do it.
Let's build God's house together.
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 So what's the connection between Matthew 25 and the one great hour of sharing? Our gifts to the one great hour of sharing meet the stranger that we will never see, but whom Jesus gives us to care for. Through the Presbyterian Hunger Program, Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, and the self-development of people, we as Presbyterians are feeding, clothing, housing, and caring for refugees, widows, and orphans, and for those whose communities are beset by disaster, systemic poverty, and the effects of structural racism. Every Easter, we receive the one great hour of sharing.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about Matthew 25 in First Presbyterian Church. In early January, the local and global missions committees agreed jointly that this was something that we felt we wanted to pursue. That we wanted First Pres to become a Matthew 25 church. Matthew 25, as we've discussed, is an initiative supported by the Presbyterian Church of the U.S. and endorsed by both the 2016 and 2018 General Assemblies. And it's based on the parable of the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25, in which Jesus makes clear that what we do to the least of these, the sick, the hungry, the imprisoned, and the poor, matters to God. It calls for us to actively engage in our community, our congregation, and the world. And these, as we discussed, are the three focuses that we can choose one or choose them all. They are to build congregational vitality, to dismantle structural racism and to eradicate systemic poverty. These are things that in many ways First Presbyterian is already doing, and we'll talk more about that. To become a Matthew 25 church, we sign up as a church on the PCUSA website. Then we select one or more of these focuses to adopt, and we agree to share our stories with PCUSA from time to time via written accounts for about 250 words, photographs, and videos. That's all we have to do. We don't have anybody looking over our shoulders and telling us we're not doing a good job. It's all up to us. This is a map of the US with Matthew 25 churches on it. These are just churches. There's another map for synods and another map for presbyteries. But as you can see, there are a lot of Matthew 25 churches. In East Tennessee, Highland Presbyterian Church in Maryville, Eusebia Presbyterian Church in Seymour, and First Presbyterian Church in Jefferson City are all Matthew 25 churches. Also, our presbytery, the Presbytery of Middle Tennessee, and our synod have adopted Matthew 25. And I'll just say, I'm from Alabama, and lots of the churches that I used to belong to, like First Presbyterian Auburn, South Highlands Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Edgewood Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, and then the church in Tuscaloosa where my grandparents attended. All of those are Matthew 25 churches, and there's a lot more besides that. So it's fun to see if the churches you know are on there, and you just go to the website and you can see which ones are. Now Colleen is going to tell us ways that Matthew 25 churches help communities.
Well, in our own community, we are already doing many of the things to address poverty, to dismantle racism. And as a result, we are becoming a more vital congregation. But we have been so separated, we may have forgotten some of the things we're already doing. When Jesus was speaking to those on the right and those on the left in the final judgment, those on the right said, well, when did we see you in the poor, in the hungry? And Jesus said, when I was naked. Now, I take that to mean Jesus meant stripped bare, exposed to the elements, and exposed to humiliation. Well, today in our community, that could mean unsheltered. Homelessness is both a cause and an effect of poverty. And First Presbyterian Church is addressing this through the Volunteer Ministry Center, through Family Promise, through Habitat for Humanity. But we need to go beyond that and say, why is there not enough decent, affordable housing available? That's the kind of question Justice Knox is asking. When did we see Jesus as a stranger? Well, when we were helping the refugees. For decades, First Presbyterian has reached out all the way back to the Vietnamese boat people, and most recently to the Congolese families that became a part of our church. We also offer the refugee church, Mountain of Hope, a place to meet. But the stranger also means someone unlike me, the other. How are we welcoming them to our congregation? Jesus said, you responded to me when I was sick. And we know from the stories of Jesus' life, he meant in body and in spirit. Through Justice Knox, we are working to encourage the criminal justice system to treat mental illness not as a crime for which someone is jailed, but as an illness for which someone deserves treatment. Jesus said, "It was when I was in prison." Many are imprisoned in poverty for lack of education. And First Presbyterian is providing supplies and tutoring at Dogwood. And through Justice Knox, we are working for restorative practices in schools to avoid the suspension of Black students that could set them on a road to incarceration in the future. Jesus was speaking to all the nations gathered for judgment. He was addressing institutional systems of racism and poverty. And we do that through the mission market, where we are supporting Congolese farmers in Eastern Congo and the Panzi Hospital through the Congo Coffee Project, through fair trade chocolate, buying and selling fair trade chocolate. We are guaranteeing that that chocolate is produced without child labor. And the newest product in the mission market, pecans from new communities in Southwest Georgia, where Black farmers have been able to develop a land trust in spite of the discrimination and violence that they've experienced in the past. And also through working together with Black partners, through Church Women United and through Justice Knox. So how does this help us, Meredith, become a vital congregation?
Yeah, so I want you guys, I can't see all of you because we're in presentation mode and that's okay, but humor me. Close your eyes tight for 1 second and think, when this pandemic is over, what does life look like? What does church life look like? Well, my hope is that we are hugging and shaking hands and able to be together. That might be a little ways off. Let's face it, I'm only 35 years old. I got a long way to get my vaccine. Now, some of y'all have got it, that's great, but we need to begin thinking about now how to revitalize and get our folks back to First Presbyterian Church. And so one of the things that we've been tasked with is the session and the PNC have asked us to go to our committees, to the church committees, and think of ways and brainstorm and think out of the box and come together and be prayerful about intentionally re-engaging. And so the local and global missions committee, as Kelly already said, has found this particular initiative, this tool to help us on a path towards directing us in a very focused way. And so, of course, we're already doing this kind of stuff. We know that. But we think that we need to, like I said at the beginning, be shifting from a mode of survivalism to a mode of recognizing that before we can even regather, we can be helping our community, especially the community surrounding us right outside our doors. And so we want to develop a culture and a mindset that pursues the call that God has for us to do what? To love our neighbors and to name the crisis that we have been suffering collectively together, and then to respond to the cries that we have heard in our community that are begging for mercy and justice. And there are lots of them. But besides those outside of our door, we also need to be having and naming the conversations that we need to be having as our own church family. Beautiful thing about this congregation is that we are diverse across the political spectrum, which is wonderful, but we are bound together by Christ. And so regardless of some of those things that get heated and political, what binds us together is the grace and mercy and peace of Jesus that then we respond to by caring for those in our community. And so that's our hope through this initiative. So again, this is a tool and a path to direct us. And we don't know exactly what that means going forward. This Lenten program is education to help us start thinking. And so we're not going to be done after our 5-week program. This is just the beginning. And so we're going to touch on congregational vitality now through the next video. Now, you might think that the vitality of a congregation or of a worshiping community is based on what? On the number of people in our pews. Well, that's hard right now, obviously, and it's going to be harder as we approach the end of the pandemic because so many of us like sitting in our pajamas and watching church on live stream. I wouldn't know, I've never done it, but we got to be focused on revitalizing our congregation and coming back together. And so congregational vitality, this is from the Matthew 25 website, is primarily its spiritual strength and its capacity for purposeful mission. It's evident in a worshiping community when its structural systems, finances, and discipleship practices are aligned in such a way that the community is actively engaged in the mission of God in their local community and the world. And they're powerfully focused on growing disciples in the way of Jesus Christ. And so faith comes alive when we boldly engage in God's mission in the world. It's not necessarily happening in our pews. That's where we come to worship God, but the real service is after we leave the church. And so we're going to show a video now from a church called Light of Hope Church that highlights some of the ways that they have become revitalized.
Congregational vitality, it's the embodiment of love. It's love in action. It's faith in action. Actually gave us a language to articulate what we had been doing for a while out of necessity. Now, originally it was 3 older white congregations that were in decline, and they realized that they needed to do some very radical changes.
All 3 congregations literally closed and dissolved as congregations, and they started something new together.
But when people from the community, which is 60% racial ethnic, were coming in, there was not much acceptance at the beginning. The minute we became a multi-ethnic congregation, everyone lost the right to not find out about each other's lives and struggles. Why is my black sister worried about Black Lives Matter? Why are Hispanics afraid of going to public now? Let's begin with the issue with racism. At the beginning, many of them who were passing out were embarrassed to have a Hispanic pastor do their funeral. So in several occasions, I was not invited. Actually, I was told you're not expected to be there, even though they were members of my congregation. That's history now. But there was those difficulties. So racially, we began to talk about it. Every time I felt the feeling that something was wrong and it was because of me being Hispanic, I would voice it out. And it became part of our conversation in the leadership. When I discovered the idea of white silence, that most white people will not speak when they're seeing the injustice done to somebody else who doesn't look like them. I experienced it here, walking through our campus, talking with one of the wonderful matriarchs from here, from this congregation. I asked her, what is that? And she told me, and we had that conversation, and she said, well, we were told when we were growing up not to say anything because we were being polite. And I stood back and said, polite to whom? And when I said polite to whom, a whole insight, a whole thing fell off her eyes. Oh my gosh.
It has made me realize a lot of things about myself that I did not know existed. Racism, I'm not racist. But then as we're meeting and talking, and this thing is growing, and ideas coming out and thoughts coming out, I couldn't say that anymore. Things that I had absorbed as a child and young adult, and were racist. It's amazing to me, about me, the difference that it has made in my attitude toward a lot of things.
Well, Light of Hope is one of the few churches, if not the only church that I've attended, that doesn't care whether you're black, white, it doesn't care whether you have money or you don't have money. it treats everybody the same.
From cross-cultural relationships through multicultural relationships, through now we are an intercultural community. We've gone through those three processes. Third Tuesday, we always have a community meal for the community. No preaching, no singing, we pray for the food. And we thought, what if we turn it and transform it from just community meal to sort of a dinner church? And as we introduce to the population to singing, to prayers, they love it. But they're eating together. They're singing together. They're going to have communion together. What vibrancy, what vitality is that? But the body of Christ in action. Congregational Vitality in Matthew 25 moves people to action. It is no longer, this is what we believe, but this is who we are, this is what we do.
So friends, I have a couple of discussion questions. I have my furry assistant with me because she was being silly. I'm actually going to ask Kelly if you would stop sharing so that we can see each other for our little discussion for a moment, because I think it's important. So make sure if you'd like to participate that you unmute yourself. So I have 3 questions for you. And I know today was a lot of videos, and we have some really exciting speakers that are coming up in the following weeks. But before we get to those things, those speakers that are speaking specifically to poverty and to some of the racial history in our community, I want us to think about our church family for a moment. I want you to think about your hopes and dreams for our church. Beyond building our church member-wise, how many butts we have in the pews, I want us to think deeper than that. What are the hopes and dreams that we have for our congregation? Throw it out there. It can be something deep. It can be something like we need to add a slide, which we've had that request, if you remember that, to the church.
Diversity.
Diversity.
I'd like to see the church so that everyone who is a member of the church knows and understands how to be involved and is involved. I feel like my main worry is not that we don't have enough members, but that we have so many members who maybe they come on Sundays, maybe they come on Wednesday nights, but they're not doing much else. And sometimes that's me.
Oh, thank you, Louie. No, I appreciate that.
Okay. I would like to see our church relate better to the community around it. It's right now, it seems like it's a whole lot about us and that church building and a lot of people around us that really just look at us as not being part of them, and vice versa.
Thank you, Ron. Donna, are you speaking? You are on mute.
How's that?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I was going to say, what resonated with me was when you said that there were only like 5 households that are actually in the zip code of our church. Sometimes when I look at what churches are doing, across denominations or whatever, they'll have a community garden, for example, or something. And in an odd way, I don't really know our neighborhood. I don't know really some of the needs. I don't know if it's a grocery desert. There doesn't seem to be a grocery store downtown, but there are stores further out Magnolia. So for example, that's just an example. I'm not really sure that I know my neighborhood as some of the specific needs of the people who actually live in it day in, day out. And knowing that I'm not really in the neighborhood except in our church has helped me understand why I feel that disconnect.
Thank you, Donna. Jenny?
Need to unmute.
She's working on it.
Okay. Here, I'm one of the 5
So I'm lucky enough that I have a car that I can drive to Publix or Kroger's or whatever and get those groceries. But there are so many who are not that lucky. So, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Speak up if you, I'm afraid I'm missing hands, but just speak up if you'd like to.
I know a place where we could get involved. The YWCA in East Knoxville, which provides after-school programs, particularly for Vine middle schoolers. They are always needing tutors. They need food to feed the children after school. They need people who would play basketball with them or whatever. So, and that's, I guess, in the zip code, I'm not sure, but it's very close to the church.
It's very close, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, yeah.
For us to be known. And maybe we are, and I don't know that, and then that's also a problem. But, you know, our location's not the greatest in terms of visibility. So a lot of people don't even know we're there. I don't think we do enough to tout who we are, if you will. And I'm not talking about knocking on door-to-door evangelism, but just being present in all of the things that go on downtown, for instance, and having a presence so that, you know, maybe the inquisitive would be there, or we would be actually doing a service project in downtown and somebody would be curious to know why we're there, and then they'd realize, well, we're your neighbor. That's why. You know, I want us to be attractive in the most Christ-like way that we can be. I think Christ was very attractive to people, obviously, and that's the kind of attractive I want our church to be.
Thank you, John. And I'll say, and I'm not putting this all on her shoulders because all of us need to participate in this, but Katie Norrell, you know, we hired as our new director of communications, and one of our goals is to have her help us figure out how to have more of a public presence in different ways. Now, that's not necessarily mission oriented, but at least getting into the different media outlets, getting into, you know, Market Square perhaps in some way. But this is also a shift in culture for us to think about. I mean, John, I really appreciate what you said, because for a long time, we have expected people to come to us, to come through our doors. And in order for us to be faithful, we've got to meet people where they are. And sometimes that means getting out of the church, which we do. There's no doubt that we do that without an expectation that they're going to come to our church. So membership, I think, cannot be the driving force, but it is to be a true contributor in our surrounding community. And so I think there's something to be said that there are some of you that don't know this neighborhood, and that's okay. That's good for me to know. I feel like I live at the church, so I feel like I know it, but it seems like we need to do some education as far as what's immediately surrounding us. I'll tell you one of my dreams. I look at the biggest bus station from my office almost every day. And there's a parking garage right next to us. So we have hundreds, if not more, traveling past our church on a regular basis. And there is potential there for something. I don't know exactly what, but there's something there to be tapped into. And somehow I'm hoping the Spirit will reveal it to us, because I think that is something that could be really life-giving. And, you know, it may mean that we only encounter people once and we never see them again, but that's still us working in the world and sharing our mission, hopefully. Any other hopes and dreams that you'd like to lift up?
I think in relation to what John is saying, is that if you were going to take what's said tonight, I think we need to take one or two things and start working with them. One being, from what John says, people don't know the neighborhood. Now, you think you live there, but how much do you know about Austin Homes? How much do you know about the apartments around us? And there are numerous ones now, and condos. How much could you teach somebody about the YWCA? People are more familiar with the YMCA. How could you about other things that are going on downtown? And so far as us doing this, then the Chamber of Commerce may already have a video or a DVD that we could go to a meeting get something from them, or work with us to develop something that will tell people what is the inner city of Knoxville right around us, what's within a mile or 2 miles, northwest, east, and south. And, to where people can, our own people don't know what's downtown. If you have not worked in the areas downtown and the schools downtown, you do not have a picture of what Knoxville is. And if you're wanting diversity, if you're wanting to deal with the racism, the poverty, the hunger, the, lack of clothing and lack of shelter and those types of things, it is right here with us. But we started this downtown thing, I guess William was here 12 years. Is that right? We started this and had a meeting about a year into him being here. And we had goals set for the downtown, and we had methods to do it. And we're doing the same thing again right now that we did then. And nothing has advanced in those years. And so I think we can even go back to those notes and those suggestions, but we need to take one thing and do it. And get started with it. And I think it's important to let people know what is around us before we can just take a person, or, okay, we want to reach out to this group, or we want to reach out to that group. We need to decide, what do we want to show them? People don't even want to go down Broadway where the missions are, because there's so many people there. They're terrified, and that type of thing. So I think we could start there, like what John's talking about. What are we, and what do we want to show people downtown? Our own people as well as other people, and how can they work into that?
And that's the whole point of this presentation in Matthew 25. So that's what we're trying to explore. This is not a formulaic, if we do this, we'll be known, or if we do this, they will come. This is going to take not just your pastors or your staff. This is going to take a new mindset of what it means to live or do ministry in downtown Knoxville. And so we're going to try things, and it's going to fail. We're going to try things, and hopefully it works, and we're going to keep moving. But this is what I would call long haul work. It's not something that we're going to achieve, within a month or maybe even a year. It's going to take work. And also, what you're talking about, Mary, is you're talking about asset mapping. So meaning we need to sort of map out the different businesses and ministries and nonprofits and things that are immediately surrounding us, and get to know our neighbors. Simply learn what resources are out there. So I want to ask one more question, and we're almost out of time. This has more to do with our own church family. Okay, so we're looking a little bit more inward now. So the question is, what conversations do you wish that we were having together? What are those things that you wish that we would tackle and figure out together as a church family?
I liked what you said about more engaging the entire congregation. I'd like to know more about what other people are doing, where they're serving, where somebody maybe feels left out because they don't know where they can serve or what their gifts are. It's hard for people to figure out what their gifts are. And I'd like to see intergenerational. I think it's going to be kind of tough for older people to come back to the church. I think it's going to be kind of tough for maybe some of the younger people to come back. So I would like to see us intergenerationally recognizing each other.
Dave, did you have something?
Did somebody else beat me to the punch,
Yeah,
or is it
I'm
my?
here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have Dave and then I'll get Ron.
All right. Hi, I just something that's crossed my perspective of late is things like the book and the little self journal for things like white racism and me and things like that, just to uncover for myself just ways that I act in ways that support white supremacy, even though I try to be polite and not talk about it, or don't just not aware of some of the ways that I have been privileged and grown into things. I think it would be, we've done some things, discussions around that in the church, but I think it'd be nice to have not nice, it would be revealing to have that conversation in some depth.
Great, thank you.
In the church, and not just a bunch of white folks getting together talking about it, but having real dialogue with communities of color and other folks.
Sure. So I want to acknowledge that it is 7:30 and we're going to keep going for a couple more minutes, but feel free to leave if you need to. I know that we're about past an hour. Oh dear. Ron, what were you going to say?
Okay, I'll be real quick. There are other Matthew 25 churches, they're bound to be, that are similar to ours, downtown, etc. I'd like to see us, as maybe a first thing we do is to check around and see what some of the other churches are doing and seeing if there's anything that we might want to latch on to.
Awesome idea. I think you're absolutely right. And thankfully the website, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. The Matthew 25 website highlights a lot of churches. And so we'll have to dig through a little bit to see what kind of things urban churches are doing, but I'm with you. Why recreate the wheel if somebody's already doing something fantastic? Absolutely. Does somebody else like to speak up?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I'd like to see us continue to expand the definition of us and who we are. I look around the Zoom, and one of our strengths is our deep connections with each other. I've known many people on this Zoom my whole life, and I have 7 family members on this Zoom. And so I appreciate that so much as part of who we are. But how can we not just say, well, we need to go and as us do things for them?
Yeah.
But how I was really challenged by that last video of just what would it be like if we actually had not just 1 or 2 people that we assimilate into being us, but that we actually would feel like us expands beyond what we traditionally have been.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Rachel.
And I think we could go back to find out all of the churches that, and there too, we'd have to set a limit within, say, 2 miles of us. And then, not us think we're going to show them something. People will be amazed how many Black as well as white and how many Spanish churches there are and that type of thing. Schools right around us. People don't know what the schools are, and that we would reach out or talk to the ministers or whoever, they're global, not global, but local missions people. And just like you've done with Justice Knox, and let them and us and them all come together and have a meal and see what anybody is doing or wants to do. We're not the only person at the VMC. We're not the only person helping the Y. We're not the only person doing a lot of this stuff.